Hi everyone, this is going to be a video walkthrough on problems B and C for question 1 on CS61B Spring 2021 exam prep discussion for week 4 on inheritance. That was a doozy. Okay, let's dive in. So the question begins by saying, you may have noticed that jack.watch Sohum produces a compile error. Interestingly, we can resolve this error by adding casting. List 2 fixes that would resolve this error. The first fix should print wow, the second fix should print game on. Each fix may cast either Jack or Sohum. Okay, so just to reiterate, what we're doing is we have jack.watch Sohum, right? This is a method call that currently produces a compiler error. What we want to do is make this work, right, to either print out wow in part 1 or game on in part 2, and we're going to fix it by adding casting, okay? So let's recall first, why does the jack.watch Sohum fail? Right, we have the code copied here, and we have Jack and Sohum's static and dynamic types copied here as well. So what we're going to do when we do jack.watch Sohum is we go to Jack's static types class. We go to class person, and we're looking for a watch method that takes in Sohum, who is of static type athlete, right? So we go to the person class, we're looking for a watch method that takes in an athlete, and we find a watch method that takes in a soccer player, right? This isn't going to work because a soccer player, right, an athlete isn't necessarily a soccer player. Okay, so what we're going to do here, in order to print out wow, we need to choose this method. Currently, the reason we're not choosing this method is because Sohum's static type is athlete. But if we change Sohum's static type to soccer player, we would execute this method. Okay? So all that we really need to do is simply cast Sohum to be a soccer player, right? In order to make that happen in code, how that looks is that we will add a cast right here. Okay? And to reiterate why this works is during compile time, what we'll do is we'll look in the person class for a watch method that takes in a soccer player, right? Because Sohum now is a soccer player after the cast, right? And we'll see that we find such a method and we're happy, right? And accordingly, what we'll do is print out wow. Okay, so the second fix to print out game on, right, is going to entail looking in the athlete class from the beginning, right? So how do we look in the athlete class from the beginning? Well, the class that we start looking in depends on the static type of Jack, right? So Jack's static type is currently person, so we look in the person class. But if we make Jack's static type athlete, what we're going to do is look in the athlete class, right? So in order to make Jack's static type athlete, we can just simply add in a cast. How that's going to look is it'll look like athlete, Jack dot watch Sohum. Okay, and I'm just going to quickly walk through why this works. So during compile time, we look in the athlete class because Jack now is an athlete, right? Now has static type athlete. And we're looking for a watch method that takes in an athlete because Sohum is an athlete. We find such a method, and then we choose that method to execute. Okay, so then this prints out wow, this prints out game on. And that's a solution for part B. Okay, exciting. Let's move to part C. I'm gonna get rid of some of this stuff. Okay, so for part C, what we're trying to do here is leverage this new mentality that we've learned of how we can solve these failures or these compiler errors, these runtime errors by adding or removing casting, okay? So we're gonna go through all of the errors from above, right, both compile and runtime errors, and try to figure out, can we fix this with casting somehow, okay? And then we're gonna keep track of all the errors that we can fix below. Cool. So how I'm going to approach this is, oh, I kind of deleted some of this stuff. So let me just add that back. Okay, so how I'm going to approach it is let's just walk through all of the results from before, and every time we see an error, let's ask ourselves, can we somehow resolve it, right? So what we're going to do is I'm just going to highlight all of these errors. So we have this error, and then we have, right? So these are all the errors that we have. And let's note that we already kind of like resolved this in part B. So it's not technically an error, but I just noted it for rigor. Okay, let's start off by looking at soccer player Shivani is equal to a new person, right? Can we somehow resolve this error? I think a first good guess is that what happens if we just add in is soccer player cast here, right? What'll happen here is that now we're going to get a runtime error instead of a compiler error because we're not actually allowed to cast a person to be a static type soccer player, right? This cast doesn't make sense. It actually throws a class cast exception. So it doesn't actually resolve the problem. It just merely postpones the problem to now be a runtime error, okay? So for the first question, you actually can't solve this with casting. So I'm just going to note in red that there's nothing we can do to solve this compiler error. Okay, and then for the second one, we actually fixed that in part B. Okay, so we have these 3 errors left, okay? Walking through these errors one by one, I'm actually going to group up 3 and 4 together, okay? Now I'm going to argue that we can never actually watch Itai. The reason we can never watch Itai, and what do I mean by watch Itai? I mean have Itai passed in as an argument to the watch method. This will never occur. The reason it'll never occur is because Itai is of dynamic type person, right? Itai is a person. So we can never cast Itai to be a soccer player or an athlete because that will be an invalid cast, right? Accordingly, we know that both of these lines are ultimately executing the watch method with Itai passed in as an argument. But if Itai can never be passed into the watch method, both of these lines could never possibly occur, right? So what we can say is that there's no possible fix for these two. Nice. So for this last one, there actually is a fix. And the simple fix is that we can simply remove the soccer player cast. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Let's copy this down. If we have this right here, what we can do is simply get rid of this cast so that it now looks like jack.speak to Chiroshri. Okay, so why does this work? Let's quickly walk through why this works. Okay, so now what we're just doing is we're just doing jack.speak to Chiroshri, right? We're ignoring the cast. And I'm going to argue this solves the problem, okay? This solves the problem because the only reason it errored before was that we're not allowed to cast Jack to be a soccer player. So after getting rid of that cast, now Jack will say I'm a person, we'll look in the person class for a speak to method that takes in a soccer player. We find one that takes in a person, this suffices, there's no error anymore, right? Okay, so this is the only actual fix. And yeah, that is all for parts B and C on problem 1. Thank you guys for watching.